Hello and welcome back to another Wildlife Wednesday. Today I think I will be raising a pretty important question that quite honestly doesn't have an easy answer, at least an easy answer that I can think of or agree with myself upon. And that question is, what is a weed? Or what constitutes as a weed? Really, what is a weed? And I think that's a perfect question to ask while sitting under this gorgeous black walnut. Black walnuts, while a native species to Wisconsin, have a tendency to be a rather weedy species. And that can cause some confusion and some interest into the question of what is a weed. Now, in the case of black walnuts, we can look at this one here, and it's a massive tree. But not only will you notice that this is a black walnut here, but that tree there is a black walnut. So is that one, and so is every other tree, well, just about every other tree that you can see in the background there. And so, unless it were truly a weed, that may not happen, especially with trees, because trees take so long to grow and there are so many opportunities for other species to come in. It is unusual to have one species of tree that dominates unless it is a weed, but black walnuts are native. So there's one example. You have black walnuts, which, while a native species to Wisconsin, are becoming ever more present in the areas of disturbance, or areas of recent logging, recent fires, or areas that had used to be prairie, like Bethel Horizons, that are no longer prairie. And so they will come in first, and as they are younger and growing, release that toxic compound from their roots, killing all other trees besides black walnuts around it, creating a monoculture within the forest. Kind of an interesting one, yet a native tree. Very cool. Now here's another example of a native species that can get a little out of hand. This plant right behind me, right here, that plant there, that is called giant ragweed, or Ambrosia trifida, trifida, either or. Really, this is giant ragweed, and it has, as many of you have experienced maybe, extreme effects when it comes to allergies, because they are wind pollinated, because the flowers on top of these plants release all of their pollen at once, and then it gets dispersed via the wind and the air. As soon as you breathe that in, if you are allergic to pollen or have seasonal allergies, especially fall seasonal allergies, this ragweed is probably the main player in the fall seasonal allergies. Yet a native plant, and a very interesting one for a couple of reasons. So as you can see here, these plants are massive. Some in more southern states have been known to get up upwards of 20 feet tall. I mean, that's just gigantic. And not only is that large for a rather herbaceous plant, one that does not have a woody stem, it is extremely large for an annual. Ragweed is not a perennial plant. Every single ragweed individual will die after a year. They set seed sometime in the late fall, and then those seeds will germinate in the spring, grow maybe upwards of 20 feet in 1 year, and then die. They do not live longer than 1 year, hence being an annual. And it is absolutely astounding. Quite an interesting plant, and quite an interesting adaptation to grow so tall so fast for an annual. And not only is it just any annual, but it is an annual within the sunflower family, Asteraceae. So a little bit of a different take on the sunflower family, you could say, with the wind pollination. There's no petals on it. It just kind of looks like a green flower, as you saw back there. And it's an annual too, growing upwards of 20 feet. Outstanding. But again, a native plant that many would consider a weed. Now, of course, we can all think of non-native plants that are rather weedy, such as this burdock here, with these horrendously sticky burrs and rather large leaves, or also the plant that is seeding right next to it, This is garlic mustard. This is just garlic mustard a little bit later in the year. Normally something you would see in the spring, but these are the seeds of garlic mustard. This is a dried up kind of stem, but this is what it looks like later in the year once all done flowering and kind of closed up shop for the year. Alright, there's sniffling in the background. Alright, so we've talked about non-native plants, of course, that are weeds, and native plants that have like weedy tendencies. Now here's a non-native plant that really doesn't have a weedy tendency. This right here is called Bittersweet Nightshade. Let me see. Yeah, so this is Bittersweet Nightshade. You may think it looks familiar to a tomato, maybe, or a pepper flower, and that's because it's in the same family. It's in the Solanaceae, which is the pepper, tomato, and potato family. As you can see here, they do produce little fruits that kind of look like unripe tomatoes. Those will ripen to a more purple color, but for now, they're little green, tomato-looking things. So very similar to a tomato, but they are nightshade. And so that, of course, usually is a good way to tell that this is poisonous. So this is a poisonous plant, but it's also kind of a beautiful one. So it was brought over as an ornamental plant, a plant that would be used in gardens and things like that. But of course, it escaped cultivation, and it made its way out into the wilds of Wisconsin and North America, where it is not native to. However, it hasn't exactly taken over. It's more of a non-native, you could say it's almost naturalized at this point. It's not really invasive, it's not really weedy, it doesn't take over environments, it's just kind of there. It just kind of hangs out in spaces that are left open, or maybe, every once in a while it'll find an open space where it can hang out, but really not an invasive plant, more of a non-native that is very hardy and able to withstand conditions that other native plants may not be able to. Now, to cap off this presentation, I want to talk about one last thing. Goldenrod. That is right there, what you just saw is goldenrod. I believe that is Canada goldenrod, and one of the most common flowers here in Wisconsin, especially from the time of late August into early October. This will take over prairies. It has been described as seas of yellow. But of course it is a native plant, and not only just any native plant, but a beloved native plant. But of course, this is a native plant that has rather weedy tendencies. It grows in monocultures. When it does bloom, usually it will take over an area, creating a sea of yellow. It is able to grow in rather harsh conditions, maybe even like in a parking lot in a crack somewhere, It has all of the features that would make it invasive outside of the fact that it is native and plays a role in the ecosystem. And I think that's a perfect way to close out this discussion, is even though goldenrod may take over this whole prairie in about a month, everything you will see here that is blooming will essentially be goldenrod and maybe one or two other aster species. But essentially goldenrod will be taking over this prairie. Absolutely everything. However, goldenrod has functions that it provides within the ecosystem. It provides, homes for the goldenrod gallbug. It provides nectar and pollen for any pollinators that are around that time in the year. And it provides many other ecosystem services to maybe soils, fungi in the ground, anything that, a lot of stuff that honestly we as humans probably just don't even know about yet. But because it is from this environment and has belonged to this environment and has a whole host of symbiotic relationships with other plants, fungi, animals, insects, birds, whatever it may be, goldenrod, while having the growth tendencies of a weed or a non-native plant is one of the most important plants here in Wisconsin. Now, if there's anything that I want you to take away from this Wildlife Wednesday, it's that not everything is what it seems. So, like goldenrod can have weedy tendencies, growing just about anywhere and everywhere, and taking over environments quite literally from in the month of September. I mean, blooming everywhere, many different species of it, but at the end of the day, it provides many ecosystem services. Whereas a non-native plant, even a non-weedy non-native plant, one that is not invasive, such as that black locust, one that really does not become a weedy nuisance most of the time, doesn't really provide that many ecosystem services. It doesn't have a function within Wisconsin's native ecosystem. There are no other animals, insects, fungi that have a relationship with that tree. The only thing it really does for us is it kind of, it'll take in CO2 from the air and put it in the ground, or put it in its tissue. That's really all it does. It doesn't do much else other than that. You could say there are a few other things that it does, but really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really serve a purpose within the ecosystem, which is kind of something to think about. Thing to think about when you are planting. If you are planting, try and plant natives, even if it is whatever it may be. There's a whole slew of natives that are absolutely gorgeous, as you can see behind me. I have at least 4 to 5 different species of sunflower. There's a whole lot you can plant. Go out there and enjoy. But native plants kind of are the way to go, even if they are considered a little weedy, such as ragweed. Ragweed even serves functions within the ecosystem. No matter how bad it makes your allergies, it does serve quite a good function. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this Wildlife Wednesday. I hope before I see you on the next one, you're able to get outside, even if it's just around your block. Maybe you'll see some goldenrod growing in the cracks, the cracks along the sidewalk. But either way, I hope you get outside, and I will see you on the next installment of Wildlife Wednesday.